What the hell is this? Jake slammed the journal onto my desk. The IEEE publication. My paper. My research. My name, alone, under the title Quantum Error Correction in Distributed Networks. I can explain. Explain? You went behind our backs. His face was purple. Veins bulged. After we removed you from the patent for team cohesion, you pulled a stunt? I stared at him. Removed me. For team cohesion. You removed me from my own patent. The company's patent. Your work belongs to Lakeside. My throat closed. 3 years. 3 years of 18-hour days, of missed dinners, of Julie asking why mommy never came home anymore. 3 years of bleeding myself dry for this breakthrough, and they just erased me. The journal submission was mine. I filed it before. Before what? Before we gave you a reality check about team dynamics? Jake's laugh was sharp. You think you're irreplaceable, Giana? You think your little tantrum will change anything? Little tantrum. My hand shook. Not from fear. From rage so pure it felt like electricity. Get out. Excuse me? Get out of my office. He leaned over my desk. Coffee breath. Cheap cologne. This isn't over, Johns. Not by a long shot. The door slammed. The walls seemed to vibrate. I sat there, staring at my name in print. The only proof I existed in this place. The quiet after Jake left felt like a vacuum. I touched the journal's pages, glossy, official, real. My first major publication. Should have been a celebration. Instead, I thought about the last 3 years. How it started with such promise. I joined Lakeside straight from MIT, Julie barely 2 years old. The quantum networking project was ambitious, revolutionary, even. They gave me a team, resources, freedom to explore. For the first time since becoming a mother, I felt like myself again. Not just Julie's mom or Tom's wife, but Dr. Giana Johns, quantum computing researcher. The early days were intoxicating. 18-hour stretches in the lab, wrestling with error correction algorithms, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Tom would bring Julie to the office sometimes, and she'd color quietly while I worked. Mommy's making the computers talk to each other, I'd tell her. The breakthrough came at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. I'd been stuck on a particular decoherence problem for months. The mathematics kept breaking down, the error rates too high for practical application. Then suddenly, clarity. A new approach to quantum channel stabilization that nobody had considered. I worked for 3 straight days, barely sleeping, barely eating. When I finally had the proof of concept working, I called Tom at 4 a.m., crying with exhaustion and joy. You did it, he whispered, trying not to wake Julie. I did it. I actually did it. But success at Lakeside meant committees. Patent committees, publication committees, team integration committees. Suddenly my solo breakthrough became collaborative research. My algorithm became our innovative approach. I told myself it was normal. Corporate research was different from academic work. I was being naive about intellectual property, about team dynamics, about the bigger picture. The late nights continued, but now they were filled with meetings, not discovery. Presentations to executives who nodded without understanding. Revisions to papers where my technical language was simplified, sanitized, made more accessible. Julie started asking why I was always tired. Tom started making dinner every night without asking if I'd be home. I'd promised myself I wouldn't become one of those parents who chose career over family, but here I was, missing bedtime stories for budget reviews. The patent filing should have been the culmination. 3 years of work, finally protected, finally mine. Instead, it became another committee decision. Team image, they said. Investor relations. My name disappeared from the invention disclosure like it had never existed. I signed the papers. What choice did I have? But I'd submitted to the journal months earlier, back when I still believed my work belonged to me. Before I learned that everything I created, everything I discovered, would be filtered through Lakeside's corporate machinery. The acceptance letter came the same week they removed my name from the patent. The irony wasn't lost on me. After Jake left, I closed my office door and sat in the silence. The journal lay open on my desk, evidence of what I could accomplish when my work remained my own. I opened my laptop and began making lists. Not revenge lists, not yet. Inventory lists. What did I know about Lakeside that others didn't? What systems had I helped build? What vulnerabilities had I noticed but never mentioned? 3 years of 18-hour days meant I'd seen everything. The servers running legacy code with known security flaws. The backup systems that weren't actually backing up critical data. The executive emails discussing patent applications before they were filed, potential insider trading issues. I knew which engineers were job hunting. Which managers were padding their expense accounts. Which executives were having affairs. But knowledge without leverage was just gossip. I started small. Began documenting everything. Not obviously, just meticulous note-taking. Meeting summaries that included exact quotes. Email threads copied to personal folders. System architecture diagrams that showed security gaps. During lunch breaks, I walked the halls differently. Listening instead of talking. Observing instead of participating. Funny how invisible you become when people think you're broken. Jake had called me irreplaceable sarcastically, but he wasn't wrong. I'd designed half the core systems. I knew every shortcut, every workaround, every buried piece of technical debt that kept our quantum network stable. I also knew it was all held together with digital duct tape. The real discovery came during a routine security audit. I was reviewing access logs, part of my actual job, when I noticed something interesting. Several executives had administrative access to systems they shouldn't even know existed. Not just viewing access. Full administrative control. Including access to the patent database. I pulled the logs for the week they removed my name. There it was, a series of unauthorized modifications to the patent filing system. Not just removing my name, but backdating the changes to make it look like I'd never been listed as an inventor. That was illegal. Federal felony illegal. I made very careful copies of everything. The next week, I volunteered for additional security audits. Happy to help ensure our intellectual property is protected, I told the compliance team. They were thrilled to have someone with my technical background taking initiative. I found irregularities in 17 different patent filings. Names added and removed without proper documentation. Invention dates altered. Prior art citations mysteriously disappearing from applications. Lakeside wasn't just stealing credit from me. They were running a systematic intellectual property fraud operation. I documented everything. Encrypted backups on multiple drives. Timestamped screenshots. Detailed technical analyses proving the tampering. But I didn't act. Not yet. Instead, I started attending networking events. Academic conferences. Industry meetups. Re-establishing connections I neglected during my Lakeside obsession. Giana. Haven't seen you since MIT. How's the quantum work going? Challenging, I'd say. But I'm learning a lot about corporate innovation. I never badmouthed Lakeside. Never complained. Just listened, observed, and quietly rebuilt my professional network. People remembered my graduate work. My early papers. They were interested in my current research, the real research, not the sanitized corporate version. I started getting inquiries. Consulting opportunities. Speaking engagements. Options. The first move was subtle. During a routine system maintenance window, I implemented some security improvements to our patent database. Nothing malicious, just better logging and audit trails. The kind of changes that should have been there from the beginning. Suddenly, every modification to patent filings would be tracked, timestamped, and automatically backed up to immutable storage. I announced the improvements in a cheerful email to the compliance team. Enhanced IP protection measures now in place. All patent modifications will be fully auditable going forward. Jake's response was immediate. Why wasn't I consulted on database changes? These are standard security protocols, I replied. I assumed you'd want our intellectual property properly protected. He couldn't argue without looking incompetent. The second move was more aggressive. I'd noticed that several of our quantum networking patents contained prior art that hadn't been properly cited. Not oversights, deliberate omissions that made our applications look more novel than they actually were. Patent fraud. I prepared detailed analyses showing the missing citations, cross-referenced with publication dates and filing timestamps. Then I submitted them as helpful clarifications to the Patent Office. Not whistleblowing, just being thorough. The Patent Office loved thorough. They opened formal reviews on 6 applications. Lakeside's legal team went into panic mode. Emergency meetings. Expedited reviews. Expensive consultants brought in to assess exposure. I attended every meeting, taking careful notes, asking innocent questions. How did these citations get missed initially? Do we have documentation showing our due diligence process? Should we be concerned about other filings? My questions were helpful. Constructive. The kind of questions a conscientious employee would ask. They were also designed to create maximum paranoia. The third move targeted our technical infrastructure. I'd built most of our quantum error correction systems, which meant I knew exactly how fragile they were. One misconfigured parameter could cause cascading failures across the entire network. I didn't sabotage anything, that would be illegal and detectable. Instead, I simply stopped providing the informal maintenance that kept everything running smoothly. No more off-hours troubleshooting. No more proactive monitoring. No more covering for other people's sloppy code. I did exactly what my job description required, nothing more. Systems that had run flawlessly for months suddenly became unreliable. Error rates spiked. Performance degraded. Customer complaints started pouring in. Giana, we need you to look at the quantum stabilization issues, Jake said during our weekly team meeting. I'm happy to help, but I'm fully committed to the security audit project right now. Perhaps we should bring in some outside consultants? Outside consultants who would charge 10 times my salary to fix problems I could solve in an afternoon. The fourth move was purely informational warfare. I started a weekly email newsletter, Quantum Computing Industry Updates, that I sent to our entire technical staff. Useful articles, conference announcements, job postings at other companies. Especially job postings. Thought you might find these opportunities interesting, I'd write. Always good to stay current with the market. Within 2 weeks, 3 of our best engineers had received recruitment calls. Within a month, 2 had given notice. Jake called me into his office. Your newsletter is creating problems. Problems? People are getting ideas about leaving. I'm just sharing industry information. Isn't it good for our team to stay informed about the field? He glared at me. Maybe focus less on what other companies are doing and more on your actual job. Of course. Though speaking of other companies, did you see that Quantum Dynamics just published a paper on error correction that's remarkably similar to our patent application? Might be worth having legal review for potential conflicts. His face went pale. Quantum Dynamics was our biggest competitor. If they had overlapping intellectual property, it could invalidate millions of dollars in Lakeside patents. I'd spent 3 days analyzing their paper. There was no conflict, their approach was completely different from ours. But Jake didn't know that. The paranoia was spreading. Everything unraveled in a single week. It started Monday morning when the Patent Office formally rejected 3 of our core applications, citing the prior art issues I'd helpfully identified. Legal's emergency response involved throwing every attorney in the building at the problem, but the damage was done. Our entire quantum networking patent portfolio was now under scrutiny. Tuesday brought the first major system failure. The quantum stabilization network, the one I'd stopped babysitting, crashed during a high-profile customer demonstration. 30 executives from potential clients watched our supposedly revolutionary technology fail catastrophically in real time. Jake was screaming at the engineering team within minutes of the crash. How did this happen? Where was our monitoring? The monitoring systems are working fine, I said calmly. They clearly indicated the instability parameters were approaching critical thresholds. Then why didn't anyone fix it? The alerts were sent to the designated response team. Perhaps we should review our incident response procedures? The designated response team consisted of 2 junior engineers who didn't understand the underlying quantum mechanics well enough to interpret the warnings. Wednesday, the FBI showed up. Someone had submitted a detailed complaint about patent fraud to the federal authorities. Comprehensive documentation. Expert technical analysis. Timestamped evidence of systematic intellectual property tampering. I watched from my office window as agents in dark suits carried boxes of documents out of the legal department. Jake appeared at my door, sweating through his shirt. Do you know anything about this? About what? The federal investigation. I looked genuinely confused. What investigation? FBI. Patent fraud. They have documentation showing unauthorized modifications to our patent database. That's terrible. Good thing we implemented those new security measures. At least we'll have complete audit trails going forward. His hands were shaking. Giana, if you know something. I know I need to focus on fixing our quantum stabilization issues. The engineering team is really struggling without proper technical leadership. Thursday brought the exodus. Half our engineering staff had received job offers from competitors, companies that had somehow learned about our technical instability and patent troubles. Companies that were offering significant salary increases and stock options. It's like they know exactly what our problems are, Jake muttered during the emergency retention meeting. That's concerning, I agreed. Do we think there's been some kind of information leak? Friday was my favorite day. The board of directors called an emergency meeting. The patent investigation was expanding. The customer demonstration failure had triggered penalty clauses in 3 major contracts. Key personnel were fleeing to competitors. And then came the final revelation. During their forensic audit of the patent database, the FBI had discovered something interesting. The unauthorized modifications hadn't just removed names from recent filings, they went back years. Dozens of patents. Hundreds of inventors whose contributions had been systematically erased or minimized. The federal prosecutors were considering RICO charges. Jake burst into my office one last time, no longer pretending at professionalism. You did this. Somehow, you orchestrated all of this. I looked up from my laptop, where I was updating my resume. I'm sorry, Jake, but I'm not sure what you mean. I've been doing my job exactly as requested. Focusing on security, documentation, and proper procedures. The FBI investigation is the result of serious legal violations that have nothing to do with me. I'm just an engineer who noticed some irregularities and reported them through proper channels. The system failures happened because our infrastructure was poorly maintained and our response procedures were inadequate. I've been recommending improvements for months. The staff departures are what happens when talented people realize they're working for a company with serious ethical and technical problems. He stared at me, finally understanding. You're destroying the company. I smiled for the first time in months. No, Jake. I'm just not saving it anymore. 6 months later, I signed my consulting contract with Quantum Dynamics. They'd hired half of Lakeside's former engineering team and were building a quantum networking platform that would make our old system look like a children's toy. Lakeside settled the federal charges for $47 million. Jake was fired, along with most of the executive team. The company limped along for another year before being acquired by a private equity firm and stripped for parts. The patent office eventually restored proper inventor credits to 127 different applications, including mine. My name appeared on the quantum error correction patent exactly where it belonged, as the primary inventor. The IEEE paper had been cited 847 times. I'd received 3 speaking invitations and 2 job offers before I even started looking. Julie, now 5, likes to visit my new office. It has better lighting than the old one, and a whiteboard covered with equations she pretends to understand. Mommy, are the computers still talking to each other? Yes, sweetheart. But now they're having much more interesting conversations. Tom brought champagne the day the Quantum Dynamics stock options vested. We toasted in our kitchen while Julie built quantum circuits out of Legos. Any regrets? He asked. I thought about it. 3 years of my life. Missed bedtimes. Stolen credit. The bitter taste of betrayal. No, I said finally. Some lessons are worth the tuition. I never heard from Jake again, though I did see his LinkedIn profile once. He was working in sales for a mid-tier consulting firm, his quantum computing experience mysteriously absent from his resume. The best revenge, I'd learned, wasn't dramatic confrontation or public humiliation. It was simply refusing to be invisible anymore. My name was back on my patents. My work was recognized. My daughter could see her mother as something more than a victim of corporate politics. And somewhere in Silicon Valley, executives at companies built on stolen innovation were installing better audit systems, treating their inventors with more respect, and wondering if they had their own Dr. Giana Johns quietly documenting their mistakes. The quantum networks were more stable now. The conversations between computers more sophisticated, more reliable. But the most important conversation had been the one I'd finally had with myself. I was never going to let anyone erase me again.